Real estate investment practice problem using Onenote. Amortization schedule in which we will be changing the payment, looking at the impact on the home value, keeping everything else constant. Get ready, because we're raising the stakes with real estate. Here we are in OneNote. If you have access to OneNote, would like to follow along, you're not required to, but if would like to, we're in the icon on the left-hand side. We're in the Practice Problems tab down in the 4150 Amortization Schedule PMT Change Impact on Home Value tab. Also note, when using OneNote, take a look at the Immersive Reader tool. Our presentations will also be in the text area with the same name, same number, but with transcripts that can be translated into multiple different languages and either listened to or read in them. Closing the icon, we got the information up top, calculations on down below. You'll recall in prior presentations and how these kind of problems are typically set up is that we would be changing factors up top in our data set, typically either the loan amount, the rate amount, the period amount, and looking at the impact on the payment, which if done in Excel would be there in a formula, and that's how we would normally be analyzing these types of problems. However, you can do it the other way as well, which can be useful. This time we're going to be adjusting the payment. In other words, you can think about typing in the payment and then seeing what the impact would be on one other variable, keeping everything else constant, this time that variable being the loan amount. So we're going to back into that, but we're going to add one more little twist and back into not just simply the loan amount, but the home value, assuming a 20% down. Now, we do have this problem in Excel as well, so if this looks something relevant to you that you'd like to put together, you could work through the practice problem in Excel, or you can use that Excel worksheet that has been filled out to make any decision-making processes if you think that would be relevant or helpful to you as well. So basically, we're going to put the payment down here. We're then going to back into the home value. So remember the factors that will be involved. We got the home value up top. We're going to assume 20% down, so we're not going to be changing the 20%. That will calculate the down payment, in this case 20% being the $93,141. And then we have the home value minus the down payment would give us the loan amount, the $372,563, this being the amount that would be relevant for us to calculate our amortization table and so on. Then we're going to have the years, which we will keep constant at 30-year loan. 30 times 12 will give us that 360 in terms of the periods. In terms of months, we're going to have the rate, which will stay constant at the 5%. And then the payment amount is the amount that we will change and see, holding everything else constant, what the impact will then be on the home amount, which will calculate down through the loan amount. So let's see how this calculation will work. So we got the payment amount down below. And now we're going to put the function up top in the home value, keeping everything else constant. Now remember, you want to think about this as kind of like a two-step thing. If we were not backing into the home value, we would be backing into, in essence, the loan value. In other words, the easier way to first think about this would say, what if I wanted to figure out the loan value, holding everything else constant and taking into consideration the periods, the rate, and the payment? And then we'll add the one little extra step of complexity to back into the amount of the home on this calculation. So to do this, we're going to use a present value calculation. Now you'll recall if you were to make a calculation of the payment, which we've done multiple times in the past, one of the arguments in the payment calculation is PV, present value, which we've always been putting in that cell the loan amount. That's been the present value item. So this time, in essence, we're solving for the loan amount with a little bit of a twist just so we can back into the home value. So therefore, we're going to be using just the present value type of calculation. This one, I like to put a negative up front. If you don't put any negative in on it, it'll result in a negative number. So you could put the negative in the payment, but I like to put it up front for some reason. It's a little easier for me. And then I'm going to say present value. The rate is going to be that 5%. It's referencing this 5% down below, that 5% being a yearly rate. We need a monthly rate. Therefore, we're going to divide it by 12 for the monthly rate. We're going to say comma to get to the next argument, that next argument being the number of periods. Number of periods is referencing down here the 360, which is 30 times 12, 360 months, comma. The next argument is the payment amount. The payment amount, this time we just typed in there. That's the one that we're going to manually change. That's going to be $2,000 to start off with. And that then would normally give us the amount, but it would give us the loan amount. So what we want to do is get back up to the home value. So if we were able to calculate, in essence, the loan amount, we could see that the home, if we take a look at this, we could say, okay, how can I get back up to the home value? Well, if the home value was 6465704 times 20%, that gives us that 93141 minus the 465,704. That would give us then the loan amount. Or I can get to that loan amount by taking the 465,704 times 100% minus 20%, otherwise known as 80%, 0.8. And that would give us the loan amount down here as well. So we would like to do that with a formula. So I'm going to divide by then, because I'm at the loan amount, I'm going to get back up to the home. So if I had the loan amount here, for example, of the 372563 divided by 0.8, that should get us back up to the home value. So this present value up to this bracket would give us the loan amount. I need to divide it by 80%. So we're dividing, and then instead of just putting 80%, I'm going to say 1 minus this cell, referencing the 20%, so that if I change the 20% to 10% or something like that, it'll all work out and everything will tie together, referencing whatever we can to our data when we can. So that calculation will give us the home value. It'll get it all the way up here to the home value. Then the 20% will be calculated automatically to get the down payment. And then the loan amount will be calculated down here, and that will be what is used to calculate then the amortization table. We have our total payments, which we can calculate as always on down below, and that's just simply going to be the 2,000 payments times the 360 periods. So we'd be paying $720,000 over the life of this loan, minus the amount of interest that we would be paying, or minus the loan amount, 372,563. would give us the amount of interest for the 30-year time period. The next thing we might want to do is to say, okay, well, what if I just had a series of payments that are within, say, my budget from 600, we're going to go down to 3,000, going up by increments of $200, and see how much home we can purchase as we increase the payment amount step by step, allowing us to see the home value side by side in alignment with the monthly payments, so we can make that comparison side by side as opposed to changing it one by one over here in our data cell. Then we can take the data cell from here and get fancy with it, which we'll do in Excel. I won't go into it in detail here. But we can have a drop-down list that will pick up the payments and tie this out that way as well. To do that, we would do the same kind of function here, the same function in the home value right here, and just basically copy that down. Same function here, but instead of referencing the payment in our data set, we would simply be referencing the payment in the drop down. We can copy that down then, and we get this nice side-by-side comparison of the home, how much home could be purchased in relation to or comparison with the payment amount. So once we have that, we can then make our amortization table. The amortization table would be based on the data set information here, creating the amortization table. That's going to give us our 360 periods. We can also enter a slicer to help us break that out on a year-by-year basis. We won't go into that in detail here because we've seen it in prior presentations. But once we get through the table, remember the bottom line of the table you can check should end up at 0. That's kind of your double check. We got the slicer, which can give you the breakout on a year-by-year basis if you properly put it into a table, giving us the total payments, total interest, the loan reduction, and the loan value on a year-by-year basis. If we were then to add a pivot table, which we will do in Excel, and you can use the pivot table in the worksheet if you so choose as well. It would look something like this when we add the pivot table. I won't go over the detail on how to do that because we've seen it in prior presentations. But in essence, we'd get our pivot table breaking the information out by year now instead of simply by 360 payments. That then making it easier oftentimes for us to picture or analyze things when we're making decisions and projecting out into the future, because we're not overwhelmed with 360 periods, but only 30 years as we summarize the data. We could then use the pivot table, if we so choose, to analyze different scenarios in a little bit more succinct type way as we change the data. So for example, if I was to change the payment amount, manually type in or hit the drop down and populate 1,200 in the payment amount, this then should automatically calculate the home value up top, because this is the cell that we had our function in, taking 20% of it, getting the down payment, populating the loan amount, that then populating the amortization table automatically. Then we can right click on the pivot table, refreshing the pivot table, giving us the side-by-side data on a 30-year breakout, meaning year by year instead of month by month. And so then we can do comparisons on things like, what's the interest going to be on a year-by-year basis? What's going to be the difference in the loan balance? What's going to be the ending balance of the loan on a year-by-year basis, instead of hunting through the amortization table to see what the loan balance would be at the end of each year. We can do this again. If we do this again, we change it to 1,600, and we say, okay, how much house could we purchase at 1,600 of the payment? The house calculation up top at the 372,563, and then the loan amount would be the 298.51. That then we can refresh the pivot table and see the year-by-year breakout on a 30-year. We could do the same thing if we did it one more time and we put that 2,000 in place then. If we had a payment of 2,000, how much home could we purchase, having everything else held equal or constant? We have the 465,704. 20% of that down would be the 93,141. The loan about 372,563. If we refresh the pivot table, we could see the payments, the interest, the loan balance on a year-by-year broken out again. And in this way, we can kind of construct comparisons that would be a little bit more detailed than simply the total value of the home and the loan amount and the payment. We can do some side-by-side type of comparisons, such as this, copying from the pivot table, as we'll do in our practice problem. If you want to take a look at how this might work, we could say, for example, what would be the home value if the home value is the item that's going to change, holding the interest rate at 5% and changing the payments from 1,200 to 1,600 to 2,000. What's going to be the impact on the interest payments? And we could basically say on years 1 through 30, as opposed to 360 months, looking at it on a year-by-year basis instead of a month-by-month basis. We can get a nicer kind of comparison between these options, which might help us to do like tax projections and whatnot into the future. If we have the home value over here, we also might want to know what the value is at the end of each period of the loan. And this, I believe this is the home value that we calculated. I'm not sure if it's the home value of or the loan value, but in any case, you can get basically the breakout that we're going to have here on a year-by-year basis if we had the 1,200, the 1,600, or the 2,000, and do those types of comparisons with the use of the pivot table, making it a lot easier possibly to do some kind of projections into the future. For example, trying to think about, what if I sold the home in 5 years? Where would I be in terms of a loan balance? And these three projections to figure out what my gross proceeds would be after the loan, and so on and so forth. You could do that a lot more easily if you have a pivot table and possibly breaking it out on a 30-year basis as opposed to 360 monthly periods. So again, if this is something that looks interesting that you'd want to learn how to build, we have Excel. We have a presentation that we build this basically from scratch in a worksheet, and or if you think this kind of pivot table would be useful for your own purposes for decision making, then we have an Excel worksheet that you could use the answer sheet to kind of use that for your decision making purposes.